things that I teach that's so important is to not be pushy. But if somebody's going to invest the time on a phone call with you, like make sure they walk away with some value. Make sure you're giving them something that made the phone call worth it to them.
Right.
And that's what I like to do on every call. I remember back in the day, people don't do this anymore, but when we first started at Infusionsoft, we used to do website evaluations. Like we would actually evaluate people's website, take the time. So if they didn't become a customer, they still walked away with some valuable information to help their business. So the thing that I learned there that I kind of like disregarded and found out later is a process. And if you kind of think about it like this, like if I keep getting the same result over here in my life and I'm sick of getting that result, how can I reverse engineer what's happening to get a different result, right? And there's something, what was it that happened? It was my daughter's birthday, and I remember something would happen. Me and my wife went shopping for my daughter. It was her birthday. She was my daughter wants to be an artist, so we were thinking of we're at Hobby Lobby, we were trying to get some like materials and everything, and I was like, I want to get her a canvas with like a little like thing that you put the paint on, you know, with the thumb, so that she can have the paint. And you know, I wanted to get like a little easel or something for her to be a paint on. I wanted her to feel like an artist from like France or Italy in the Renaissance, you know, make it fun, you know. And that cost X amount of money, and my wife's like, no, we're gonna get her these things with some oil. I was like, I don't want watercolor paint. I don't know if you've tried watercolor painting. When I was a kid, I hated it. It's just smeared colored water over paper, and it made it all wrinkly and dumb.
Maybe when you did it, but
I couldn't stay within the lines, okay? But mostly, I just wanted her to have fun with it, and I wanted acrylic paints that like she could feel like an artist actually painting a real painting, you know?
Sure.
My wife's like, no, let her practice, like, and I realized something, you know, after I got upset, I felt like my wife wasn't listening to me, because I was like, it's her birthday, have fun. And she's like, practical, we want practical, we need to practice on this, we can get a lot more of these little things that she could practice on, that way she has more stuff to practice on. I'm like, fun. She's like, practical. I started feeling like she wasn't listening to me, and I got angry. And normally when I get angry, just like any human being, if we feel like we're not being heard, you know, we get upset. And when we get upset, we normally do something, or we don't do something, and then we end up getting a result. So normally I would do something and would make my wife mad at me, and then we would have a bad night, and we wouldn't talk to each other. We'd go to bed angry. We'd wake up the next morning like, hey, you sleep good? Yeah, I don't really care. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the end result. So the end result was I could have a bad night. And I don't want to have a bad night. I'm at the age now where I'm like, I don't have many of these trips around the earth that I used to have, and I want to make sure every night is spent you know, optimally or whatever. So I just want to have a good night. So this is kind of the process. So if you think about it, and my result would have been having a bad night. So I can choose not to have a bad night, but we have to, like I said, reverse engineer it. So I want to walk you through this process real quick. I'm going to utilize this whiteboard here, this cool touch screen whiteboard thingamajigger. Ready? All right, so something happens in our life. Let's call it a circumstance. Woo!
There we go.
That took a lot. We got a circumstance, right? A circumstance happens. Something happens in our life. Like, you know, I think when I first got in business, something major happened in my business. I switched from, who do we used to use at Infusionsoft? It was PowerPay, and authorized.net as a merchant account. Well, I ended up switching to Chase Bank, who was my bank. I had a good banker. And I started taking bigger and bigger payments. So I'd have to call in every time and be like, hey, I'm going to charge $10,000. Can you approve that before I run it through? Well, I got sick of doing that and said, hey, just up my limit. They upped my limit. Something happened. They were like, oh, no. They canceled my account. I just ran $6,000. It was right before Christmas. And they're like, okay, we're canceling your account. I'm like, all right, well, just send me my money. They're like, well, we're not going to send it for 6 months. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, the person charged back. Like, whatever. We need the money in there. That's our policy. You don't get it for 6 months. I'm like, crap. Normally, I would have been like, brah, totally blown up and everything. But I'm able to get a better result by running through this process. So that's a circumstance. That's what happened to me. And I could normally go and say, all right, well, this bank did this to me. And I'd have this thought, right? And I'd have this thought that these guys are stupid, they totally suck, I can't stand them. They're wronging me. And I'd have that thought, and then I would have an emotion. All right? Hope I'm not running out of space here or wrong this.
You're good.
Bad, but if you can read that, that's emotion. All right? I'm going to blame it on the fact that I'm left-handed. So normally I'd have chalk or whiteboard on my hand right here.
I feel like you should have started on the other side and worked your way over. But
that could have been
but,
a better system. Hey, hindsight's 20/20, you know? So we have a circumstance, we have something happen, we have a thought about it, and then we have an emotion. So with the bank, I was angry. That was my emotion. My emotion would have made me have, or do, I should say, do or don't do an action.
Okay.
Right? So I get angry. My action is I call them up and say, give me my money and I'm going to burn your house down while you're sleeping in it. And then they cancel my account and probably call the cops. And
it's
then
kind
that
of
would have been
intense
bad.
if you did that.
It would have been intense. Would have been crazy. That's what happens when people get angry, you know? So that's the action I could have done. Or...
That's what happens when people get angry.
Yeah, and then your result is you end up in jail for saying some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Or they cancel your total account, and now you don't have a bank account at all, and you got to go spend a day, you know, setting up another bank account somewhere else or whatever. But in the instance with my wife, you know, she wanted to buy something practical. I had a thought that she wasn't listening to me, and I had an emotion of anger. And normally I would have said, what the hell, let's just have fun, what are you doing? And then I would have had a bad night. The result would have been a bad night. But I don't want to have a bad night. So I reverse engineer all of this. Now, here's the weird thing, right? We can't change the circumstance. Whatever happens to you, happens to you. That's life. Things happen. That's why I'm really against people suing people. Because it's like, oh, the doctor, like, sure, he didn't have to leave the gauze inside your body. But you know what? Nobody's perfect. People make mistakes at their job. It's what happened to you, okay? It's just what happened. We can't change that. We can't change our emotion. Nobody is good enough to change their emotion. When you're angry, you're angry. When you're sad, you're sad. When you're happy, you're happy. You can't just say, put a smile on your face and get through it. That's the emotion. That doesn't change. But what we can change is our thoughts and our actions. And if we do that, we will get a different result. So in our lives, think about it like this in your sales or even in your business as a whole. If you keep getting people that aren't closing or your business isn't going to the next level, what action or inaction are you doing that keeps getting you that same result? And usually you can tie that action or inaction. I say inaction because if I can choose to either do something or not do something.
Right.
So think about if you have a bad day at work and you have something happens, you have a thought, you have an emotion, and your action is, F it, I'm just going to go to the golf course today. That's no action, right? Mm-hmm. So I can choose to not do an action. Now, if you reverse engineer this and you change your thought, like let's just use my wife as the example. You know, she says something at the store where I'm like, that. She's going to love this one. You know, it's funny because I actually like brought this up to her before using this example. And she's like, I never knew you felt that way. I'm like, I was angry, but you didn't know. Because right when I felt that emotion, right here, I can't change the emotion, okay? Right when I felt angry, I was angry. But I'm trained in this now enough to where when I get an emotion, I can stop and check myself. So before I make an action, I could sit there and I could go back and go, you know what? What was the thought that I just had?
Right.
That made me angry. And the thought was, I was like, well, the thought is she's not listening to me. And I was able to sit there and be with it for a second and change my thought. When I was able to change my thought, I changed it to, okay, not that she's not listening to me, it's that she's trying to be practical. She wants to help our daughter get better. And this is the present that's going to help her. And this is her perspective on the best possible present to get my daughter. What the heck does a guy know about getting a present for a daughter?
Right.
Nothing. That's why she comes to me and helps me ask me to pick out the boys' gifts for Christmas because I pick out the best toys. I'm a guy. I know how to pick out boys' toys. Not very good. So I changed my thought and I was like, you know what? She's just trying to get the best present she knows for her daughter. And immediately when I changed that thought, my emotion changed. And then I was able to have a different action. So instead of being a jerk and being like, oh, you never listen to me and huff off and walk off in a puff, walk off in a
In
huff.
a huff, yeah.
In a huff. Which, if I would have walked off in a huff,
bad night.
I probably wouldn't have got lucky that night. You know what I'm saying? Like, that probably wouldn't have happened. And you know what? I want that to happen. So I went backwards. I changed my thought. Immediately, my emotion changed from anger to pretty much nothing, just like understanding. And I was able to not react about anything and say, yes, dear, you're absolutely right. We should get this and be practical. And guess what? We had a good night. We went out to dinner. It was absolutely amazing. And if you can write this down, take some notes, really it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you can focus on recognizing the emotion when you have it, going backwards and identifying the thought that you had, and change that thought, you're going to be able to change the results that you're getting in almost every aspect of your life.
Yeah, that goes way beyond sales. You know, I think about if you're a business owner, right? How often do whether it's the economic circumstances, whether it's the circumstances of what is going on in maybe one of your employees' lives, that can trigger certain things, right? It can trigger you to get certain thoughts,
right,
which create certain emotions, and then how you act on that. But what are the things that we can control, right?
Right.
Our like you said, we can control those thoughts and think about things. Let's try to look at this a little bit differently, and then we can control what actions we take and what we can do thereafter. So.
Right. And it really goes hand in hand with being able to create the culture that you want inside of your business.
Yeah.
Because when you have a group of people working together on a team, circumstances happen.
Yep.
And people get angry with each other. And if your team isn't working cohesively or calmly together, or whatever the case may be, then your business is going to suffer. So this has been like just a tremendous tool that I've been able to use with my team members to help them identify it, because, like, you know, as the business owner or the manager or whatever, you're managing emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
if you can't manage the emotion, because nobody can change the emotion, but if you can help them recognize the thought that they had, then they're able to change the thought. Now they have a different emotion and a different outcome for the rest of the day. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We've had quite the tiffs on our teams over the years.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
You know? And it's very important to change that, be able to change that thought to have a different emotion.
Well, let's talk a little bit about culture as well, and how to create also that mindset and everything within your business. Because you look at this, and not only can if each person understands this, I think your business is going to be more successful. But when you have everyone driving on the same goal,
right,
and you have everyone bought in, that's an incredible thing as well. And I know we've both seen it in places we've worked together. Not even at places when that's created.
Yeah, multiple.
And having certain culture, whatever that culture is, and having those core values of what your business is,
yep,
and who you serve, what you're driving towards, and if you're willing to hire and fire based on those things, you know, if you're willing to let someone go even though they're a super talented person because they don't meet those values of what your business is, well, your business will be more successful long term. Your business will thrive long term.
Yep.
You know, I'm not a firm believer in giving up on anybody, but you know, people have to make decisions in their life as well.
Right.
And if they're not willing to live by those things, then, you know, that's your brand that's being represented there.
Right.
By them in one way or another. So.
And it's a tough decision, especially when you're dealing with somebody that, you know, possibly was a top performer, and you got a real close relationship, and you're emotionally tied to that person and their success, and that kind of changes. You know, you do everything you possibly can to rectify the situation, but ultimately they are, like you said, representing your brand, and sometimes the tough decisions have to be made. But that ends up helping the culture in the long run. You know,
that's right.
There's a Bible scripture that talks about how God is the vine dresser, right? And sometimes it takes cutting off pieces of the vine. And if anybody has a green thumb, which I do not have a green thumb, understands the importance of pruning and how when you cut off one piece, it actually helps the whole vine as a whole. And I think that imagery really helps because it's really difficult to make that decision. And, unfortunately, I've had to make that decision. But ultimately, it's not an easy one. But you see somebody else step up into that role of top performer.
Exactly.
Like, it just naturally happens. So you can eliminate the fear. But, we have like, we had a good experience because the first company we were with didn't have a good culture.
Right.
We were able to create a good culture on our team.
In our group.
Yeah. And we proved that good culture helps.
Absolutely.
A lot, because everybody else was miserable. But but then the other company was night and day. Like when I hired
culture
you,
was amazing.
Yeah. You remember what I told you? I said, this is corporate detox.
Yeah. Yeah.
Corporate detox. Because it has an awesome culture. So there's one thing about culture is you need to have a good overall company culture, but also what's very important is the individual, right?
Yeah.
It's important to hire the individual based on the core values of you or your business. If they have the same core values as you, and I look at it mostly for me as like there's one main core value that each person has. For me, it's, I guess it would be two. It's like peace and freedom. So if my whole goal with everybody I work with, it's kind of subconscious, but it's like, if I can get you peace and freedom inside of your business, then I feel like I've accomplished something, which is huge. So everybody that works for me has to have that same core value of peace and freedom. Otherwise, we're running in different directions.
Sure.
And we have to be running in the same direction. We liken it to the bus, right? We want to in order to scale our business, we need to get people on the bus, but we need people in the right seats on the bus.
Yeah.
And we need the bus, all the people wanting to go in the same direction, because if they're going in different directions, it creates chaos, frustration within the team.
Yeah.
So there's constant individual checks that you have to do to make sure that people are continuing to be in that same culture, because people change. Yeah. Things change, circumstances change, their life changes, and 6 months from now they might have something else going on where they're like, this is not a good fit for me right now.
Sure.
And most people aren't willing to admit that because it's uncomfortable. And like I said before, they don't want to be uncomfortable because it's uncomfortable switching jobs. So they kind of stay there, sucking the life out of your business subconsciously because they don't want to move on because they're comfortable where they are when they're not growing and they're not helping the business grow. And it's very important to prune to keep that culture going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,